So this morning, I want to talk about Jacob, who is one of the great scoundrels in the Bible. And a lot of times when we talk scoundrel, we kind of have a positive connotation with that, kind of the Han Solo, lovable rogue type of thing. But Jacob really is not that. He is somebody who you would not trust with your wallet, your credit cards. Anything that he could steal, he stole. Anything he could pry loose, anything that wasn't nailed down, he would take. And anything that he could pry loose wasn't nailed down. It's the way it worked for him. And yet God uses him. So what I want to do is I want to unpack a chunk of this story. What happens is in the beginning of Genesis, we work first 12 chapters or so. We get the big stuff. We get creation. We get Noah's Ark. We get Tower of Babel. And then about chapter 11 and 12, we switch to one family. And so we get the story of Abraham and Isaac, his son, and Isaac's son Jacob and Esau. And God has said to Abraham, I'm going to use you and your descendants will be more numerous than the stars in the sky. But how does that play out? See, by the time we get to Jacob and Esau, these twins that are born to Isaac, it's kind of a crazy story. Because you've got twins, and the younger one is the one that God says, I'm going to bless him, and he's going to rule over the older one. And they're so different and so at odds. You see, Esau is the guy who is always out hunting, and he's rough, and his skin is like leather because he has always been out there in the wilderness. And he's just physically just furry, and he smells like goats because he's been out in the wilderness the whole time. And his brother Jacob is the striver, the conniver, the thinker. And so what happens is the interplay between the two of them always is a little tense. At one point, Esau is out hunting, and he can't catch anything. He just cannot find anything to kill and eat. And so he comes back in, and there's his brother Jacob with a big pot of bean soup. And he's like, I want some. And Jacob's like, I'll sell it to you. And Jacob says, I'll tell you what, I will sell it to you for your birthright for this bowl of soup. And this is everything, because as the firstborn child, he was due to inherit everything his father had. And he's not the brightest kid. He's like, sure, I'm so hungry, I'm gonna die, give me the food, and you can have my birthright. Sells everything he's due to inherit for a bowl of soup. And a little bit later is where this story picks up. See, what happens is Isaac, he's about 100 at this age, and he doesn't know when he's going to die. And so he says to his older son Esau, and even though they're twins, this birth order is important, he says, Esau, my son, go out, catch me something tasty, bring it back, and then after I eat, I will give you the blessing. And Rebekah, Isaac's wife, Jacob and Esau's mother, hears this and says to her son Jacob, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to dress you up like Esau. I'm going to put goat skin over your hands and your neck, so whenever he touches you, he will feel like Esau and you will smell like Esau. And Jacob says, I don't know we should do this. And he's not saying don't know we should do it because it's wrong. He's saying it because Dad's going to figure it out. And Mom, Rebekah, is like, don't worry. We'll get you covered. It'll be fine. And so sure enough, Esau goes off to hunt. Rebekah dresses Jacob up like Esau, and he makes his nice meal, and he brings it in. And he says, Dad, it's me, Esau. He's kind of confused for a minute. We're like, I don't know, smells like Esau. Smells like goats, must be Esau. Eats and blesses Jacob. Gives this wonderful blessing about how he shall rule over his other son, about how he shall be blessed, and all this thing, and all these wonderful things that he'll inherit. And then Esau comes back. And Isaac is like, wait a minute, if you're Esau, who did I just bless? And he's like, sorry, don't have any more blessing. You're out of luck. And so at this point, Rebekah says to Jacob, now would be a good time for you to get out of Dodge and go see your uncle Laban back in the old country. It's like a 3-week walk. Sounds about right. And so Jacob hits the road. And he goes, and he stops at this one place for the night. And he takes a stone, and he rests his head on the stone, and he goes to sleep. And he has this dream about angels ascending and descending from heaven to earth and back again. And God says, through you I will bless the world, and your riches will be like the dew on the land. And he gets up, and he says, surely God was in this place. Now, there are 3 things that I want to pull out of this story, or this chunk of the story, because the story of Jacob goes on. It's this beautiful, literate piece of artwork. It is art and it is history, and it is all these things tied together, and it is fascinating. You could work on this for years and not mind all the nuance out of it. But there's 3 things I want to examine this morning. And the first is this very human bit of wisdom, that how we act affects our relationship with others. We like to think we're saved by God's grace, therefore we can get away with anything. But the reality is that what we do has an effect on how people view us and how people respond to us. Jacob had to go back to the old country so his brother didn't have an accident with the bow and arrow, okay? That's the kind of situation we're talking about. And I was thinking about some examples of some way I could exemplify this for you. And I thought about a certain ministry director who burned all his capital, and I thought, no, that's a little too obvious with somebody. And then I thought about somebody I used to work with when I was working on commission. I thought, well, that's a little far away. And I thought, if only there was some sports figure in Wisconsin who everybody hated. Oh, yeah, Aaron Rodgers. As a Vikings fan, I am loving all the Aaron Rodgers drama, and I find it absolutely hilarious how everybody in this whole state is like, I don't care if the guy went 13-3 last year and he was the MVP. We're ready to get rid of him, okay? There are some very sweet people in this congregation who would not cross the street if he was hit by a bus, okay? I am amused by this immensely, okay? But think about it. You've got a guy who's got all the talent in the world, one of the 3 most talented quarterbacks in the world, and you guys are like, go, just go, okay? You're like, he looks like he's somebody who washed up in the shores of San Bernardino. Just get out of here, okay? Friends, the last time the Vikings had a quarterback 2/3 as good as Aaron Rodgers, his name was Brett Favre, okay? I said that at the 8:30 service, and I had the ushers telling me all the jokes about Rodgers between services. I couldn't stop laughing into my coffee. But I tell you this because it illustrates something serious that we see in the Bible. No matter how good you are, no matter how talented you are, and Jacob was talented and smart and energetic, but because he burned all these relationships, nobody trusted him, nobody could work with him. Compare that to Paul in the New Testament. Paul is just as smart, just as driven, but because his character reflects that of Christ, he gets trusted. You see all these interactions with Paul and the Romans, whether it's the centurions, whether it's the governors, it's the officials, and they all like, we are not buying any of this Jesus stuff, but you have always dealt fairly with us, we have always been trustworthy, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And they work with him. This is what we're called to do. The Bible is filled with these stories so we can learn from this. This is real people, real history for real learning for us 4,000 years later because human nature doesn't change. And so we read the story of Jacob. We look at this guy and we understand we have similar temptations. We have those temptations to take what's not ours, to manipulate the people around us, and it pays off badly. He's got to run for his life. He's out by himself in the wilderness because his brother wants him dead. And those choices he makes are going to affect him for a long time. But that brings me to my second point. God still uses him. God has still chosen this very tangled mess of a human being. And God's still like, yeah, I can do something with him. That redemption is because of God's grace, not anything Jacob did. Jacob did not deserve God's love, God's grace, God's redemption. I cannot think of many people in the Bible who deserved it less. But God knows what's in there and God uses him. And as you see the story of Jacob unfold, it's this 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing. And God continually transforms him. God has hope in him. And it's something for us to remember. It's a very old bit of wisdom. Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. There are those people you know who you love and have just this perfect reflection of Jesus, and they are this mature and loving individuals who nothing gets to them. You know those people, and you wonder, how can they do it? It is because they have spent years being transformed along the way by God's grace. And we look at those people over here, those people who are immature and self-centered. We don't want to look at them as that. We want to look at them as the potential for what God can do in their lives. And what causes a lot of our pains is we see them as that sinner and we forget about the future that they have. And sometimes we're in that mode where we're the one getting looked at with that kind of quizzical look. I got to tell you from my personal experience, when I told people I was going to go to seminary and be a pastor, I got that look from like, really? Are you sure? You. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, we remember what you did. I'm like, yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's true. But on some level, I tell you that because we've all been there on some level. And you're called to that new creation, and you want to make sure that you understand that God calls you to that thing. And then when you see those others around you, you remember the future they have. Periodically, I wonder, the next St. Augustine, where is he? The next Martin Luther, what are they struggling with right now? The next Mother Teresa, who's looking into their lives right now? Because they're probably not in a good place. But God works with those people and creates something new. And the last piece of this that I want to get for you today is where God speaks to Jacob. We are used to thinking of this sanctuary and other buildings like this as the place where we worship. And we think of this is the place where we want to go. This is the place where God's Spirit lives. And that's wonderful. It's great. And if I press most of us, we'll say, yeah, okay, we don't have to be in this place. And a lot of us will think of the outdoors and nature's cathedrals and those places where we can worship. And that's all wonderful. But I want you to be open to where God might speak to you in other places. One of the most challenging for me and the most beautiful places was near the dumpsters one time. You see, we'd been doing this prayer walk around the church campus. There's like 8 or 10 of us gathered for a night just to pray. And we would go to different places on the church campus to pray. And the ones you would all expect, we go to the choir room and we pray for all the people who lead worship and all the music ministry. We go to the front door to pray for all the visitors. We go for the nursery to pray for the kids, that sort of thing. It was great. Loved it. And I ask people, okay, where do you want to go next? Where do you want to go pray? And somebody says, I want to go out by the dumpster to pray. And I'm like, okay, sure. And we get out there, and those big dumpsters as you got in most churches, and she leads this beautiful prayer. Just heartbreaking beautiful. It was 10 years ago. I still tear up thinking about it. About praying for the unwanted, the unloved, the rejects, the disposable people that we in society just can't do anything with them, and you might as well throw them in the trash. And it was this beautiful moment of being reminded of God's grace by the dumpsters. And I share that story with you because it is such a beautiful reminder that God works in those unexpected places. As far as Jacob was considering, as far as Jacob was thinking, he was out in the middle of nowhere with nothing. And he said, we will call this Bethel, which means house of God, because God's presence is here. So as you go through your day, as you go through your week, your month, and your life, think about those places where God is at work and those thin places between heaven and earth where you do not expect them. For God is in them. And God is working in our lives, now and forever. Amen.